Hey folks, today I thought I'd put together a video on getting your bike race ready for cross-country wood style hare scramble type racing. If you race GNCC, IXCR, a lot of those type of series. There's several other ones. There's quite a few things that really make it nice. And so I thought I would go through, for those of you starting out, kind of give you some ideas of what you should try to do to your bike to make it the best you can. So I've kind of got things organized into a couple different things. There's a couple of must-haves that you need to have, it's requirements. I think there's some stuff here I got labeled as really must-have. These things are the really important critical things that's going to help you out, make you ride better, make you faster. Then I got some things that are more nice to have. Now a lot of this stuff is personal preference. With something that's really must-have to me might not make a big difference to you, but most of these are pretty impactful things. And so we'll go ahead and get started. So one of the first things that's required is, obviously you got to have a bike that's complete. You can't get one that's missing fenders or no exhaust pipe. It's just got to be a complete bike. And it doesn't really matter what kind of bike either. It doesn't have to be a sport bike. It doesn't have to be a race bike. It could be a utility bike, four-wheel drive, whatever. From there, one of the first requirements here is you need some type of footwell protection. And so on a sport bike, that's these right here. These are Nerf bars. What these do is prevent a tire from coming in or a tree from coming in and hitting you and really taking out your leg. Now a lot of the utility vehicles, they've got full running boards which do the same thing for your, so you're set if you have that. But if you got a sport bike, you're going to need to invest in a set of Nerf bars here. These also keep your feet from falling down. Very good amount of protection. The other thing you have here is this lanyard here. This is a lanyard kill switch you put around your arm. If you fall off, this yanks out and stops your bike. This is a requirement of the AMA. Whether you race or not, you really should have this thing. This is such a good safety feature. If you fall off your bike really loves just to take off and keep going. And it can go off and have its own good time, and it can cause a lot more damage than if it just stops. So this is a really good piece of gear here. They're very inexpensive, easy to install. So get yourself one of these for sure. But from a requirement, that's really your two big things that you got to have. From there, it comes down to the things that are going to make a difference for you out racing. And especially in cross-country style racing, the biggest piece of things that you can do to your bike is suspension. It's rough. You're oftentimes going in and out of trees. I spend the majority of my time in second or third gear. You occasionally get wide open and sometimes you're in first gear. But it's more of a suspension game than it is outright speed or horsepower. And so I don't really have a lot of horsepower stuff on here. I think, unless you're a really fast A rider, a stock bike will probably do you just fine. Doesn't mean you can't upgrade. Again, it's just personal preference, but when you're in second or third gear, it really comes down to the suspension. And the suspension there, you can have all the horsepower in the world. If you can't control your bike and you can't get traction, it doesn't do any good. So you really got to invest in suspension. Suspension, though, can get pricey. So there's a couple things here that you can do for your suspension. I've got here is, these are the stock shocks that came on here, and they are fully adjustable. They've got rebound, they've got compression. If you got shocks like that, you can send those out and have them revalved and resprung. What they do is they come back and tune those shocks specifically for you, and when you get them back, they're darn near as good as any top quality aftermarket shock that you can find for about a third of the price. If you're planning on keeping your swing arms and all that kind of stuff standard, that's a good route to go. If you don't have adjustable shocks, you really can't do anything with them, so you're going to need to purchase a new shock. You could purchase some used adjustable shocks and then send those out. That might be cheaper. Otherwise, you are looking to buy a new shock, some new aftermarket ones. There's a lot of varieties and they get kind of pricey. Before you get into your suspension though, especially if you're new, if you're just starting out like I was, even though suspension is the most important thing, it wasn't the first thing. It's a big investment to do, and not knowing what you're looking for, not knowing how you ride, not even know if you're going to like it, that's not something you want to do out of the gate. At least it wasn't right for me, so I waited for about 6 months. Another good reason to wait a little bit is you need a game plan for your quad. If you go in, if I go right now, I spent a lot of money having my shocks retuned. If I decide to put on long travel swing arms, those shocks are no good. I got to buy new shocks. So I just wasted a ton of money getting these ones set up. And then, if I wanted to do that. So I spent some time and decided, I'm going to keep it stock the way it is. Stock's travel length. I don't want them any wider. So I'm going to go ahead and just have mine revalved and go with that route. So you want to have a game plan, a little bit of forethought before you start investing in your bike, so you don't end up buying something you don't need. But suspension there is probably the number one thing you can do. The next thing that was hugely beneficial for me is one of the earlier things that I got is a steering stabilizer. Steering stabilizer sets up on here. I've got it protected with some mud protectors that I made so you can't really see it, but it's a shock absorber for your steering. So these quads here have very crude steering on them, and you get a lot of feedback. And so if your left tire here hits a rock, it's going to want to jerk your wheels like this. When it does that, it does a couple of things. It makes the bike unstable. Obviously makes it do one of these numbers on you, but it also just sends a massive amount of shock up in your arms and up in your shoulders. Hour and a half of that stuff there, let me tell you what, it just about kills you. Steering stabilizer, what it does is whenever it's basically a shock absorber, but when your tire hits rock on this side, instead of turning, it holds it steady. And so instead of doing one of these numbers, it just holds it steady. You don't get that shock. The tire goes up and over the rock, and your suspension takes all that shock instead of you. And that's what it's designed to do. And so that allows you to keep going straight. If you're going around the corner, the same things. Whatever direction you got your steering wheel pointed, that steering stabilizer is going to hold it there. So if you're going into a corner and you hit a rock or a rut, it's not going to jerk all over the place either. If you hit something hard enough on one of these things, it's possible also to have it jerk clean out of your hand. I was going down a straightaway, fourth gear, and I was standing up, which I don't often do, but I was, and my left tire hit like a sandy rut. This one was on hard pack, and when it did, this tire caught and just did one of these numbers. It yanked the steering wheel out of my hand, and I started to go over the front in fourth gear. The only thing to save me is I was going fast enough that the thing just slapped this way and came back straight because of the momentum. I was able to get myself back over the handlebars, and away I went. I think the next week is when I bought that steering stabilizer after that one. That was a pretty close call for me. But that just made a huge difference. After a race, it was difficult to even drive home at times. The next day, you felt like you ran over by a truck. Steering stabilizer stopped all that, and it makes your bike handle so much better. You can corner better. You can rip across flat spots better. Very good thing there. So I got myself a list of things here, so I'm going to look at it a few times. So a couple other things here, and these are really kind of mandatory, and a lot of bikes have these, and you can't see it, but you need a skid plate that goes under your engine. Now this one came with one from the factory. It was some type of plastic carbon fiber one. It was getting scratched right off the bat, so I replaced it with a thick aluminum one. But these things hit rocks, and you are going over top of logs all the time. You have to have a skid plate on the bottom, or you're going to have damage to the bottom of your engine. You also need a swing arm guard in the back. The same thing applies. Now there's a couple of routes to go, and I've gone back and forth. I started out, I bought a swing arm guard. It's a Ricochet swing arm guard, and it's a really nice one. It tucks up really close and tight to your swing arm, so it doesn't take up a lot of ground clearance. It only takes up just about the thickness of the metal. The nice thing I like about it is that it protects the actual swing arm as well as it protects your brake rotor and your chain and sprockets. And it keeps them all out of the sand and keeps them all out of the mud. The other route you can go is a separate sprocket protector and rotor protector. Now that's for racers, that's the most popular, and that's what you see out there. And the reason for that is it maximizes your ground clearance because you don't have that extra piece of metal down here. And so that's what most people run. For me, I started out on mine and I was getting high centered, and it's like, well, this is really ridiculous. Maybe I should look at getting one of those other ones. I've already bought this one, so I wasn't too enthused. But what happened is I got faster and I got more experience, I stopped getting high centered. And the ground clearance issue hasn't been an issue for me that much in probably the last 6 months. At Ironman, I was actually following somebody that didn't have a swing arm guard, and they got stuck, and I was still going. So there's some technique you can learn. The swing arm guard itself does take up a little bit of ground clearance, but there's times there when you're racing ruts that are this deep, there's not much you can do on that kind of stuff. The benefit that I think the swing arm guard does is the sprocket guard, it's got like one plate or two plates that sandwiches your sprocket, and it protects against impacts. It doesn't protect though when you're running through sand. Your chain is right in that sand, just eating it all up. With the swing arm guard, it's not like that. And the separate sprocket and rotor guard don't protect anything under your swing arm. So you're hitting rocks, it's hitting your swing arm. But that's the most popular. So I can't say that's not the right way to go because everyone does it. Very few people have swing arm guards that race, but I like mine. So one way or the other though, you have to have protection. There's probably 70% chance if you go out and do a race for an hour and a half or 2 hours and you race pretty hard, and something's going to reach up and tag your sprocket or your rotor. It's just going to happen. So you have to have something like that. Otherwise, you're probably going to be broken down the first race you go out. And they're not all that expensive. From there, I think another really, let's see what I got here. Some other things to really work on is a couple of protection things here. You need hand guards as well. These are full wraparound. They got metal here, so if you hit something there, they don't flop around. If you race in the trees, you need something like that. You need hand guards with the plastic regardless, just to keep you from the roost. But I hit so many trees, you get these like little 1/2 inch or 1 inch saplings that when they clear a new route, they don't ever clear those things out. And so you're running those things over, those things will snap up and come back. If they hit you in the knuckles, you're in for a bad day. Also, if you happen to hit a tree, you need a full metal wraparound guard. That's something there that's very important. Another thing here to look at is a set of race-specific tires. So this one here came with a really nice set of Maxxis tires, good quality. They work great, but the factory sets everything up for the middle of the road. They want the average rider doing average things. That way, majority of the people are happy. That doesn't mean that tire works great for you. And so getting something here, I got these GBC XC Masters. These are designed for cross-country style racing, and that's what they excel at. And they make a huge difference. You get a lot better traction. The mud doesn't stick to them like my stock tires do. My front tire used to get clogged with mud and I would lose steering. These don't do that. The front tires track, they turn good, they don't slide around, and these big lugs here on the back, they're a more square profile. They just go through trenches and propel you through. They handle rocks. These are 6 plies on mine, and they're just super stout as well. And so these things really make a huge difference, just in the traction, the cornering, going up some really nasty hills. You need all the traction you can get. You're oftentimes, there's jumps, there's rocks, there's, thick logs and roots that you're trying to go over with one tire and not the other. You need all the help you can get. These tires are designed specifically for that. They make a big difference. One of the last items here, I think I put on here, and this is probably may not be a must-have, but I put on here what's commonly called a big 3, and that's a new exhaust system, an intake system, and then either rejector carb or a fuel controller if you've got EFI. And the reason I say that, especially for cross country and wood racing, it's not about the horsepower. It's really about the handling. This bike has more than enough horsepower as it is. And so when I upgraded mine, I wasn't looking for more horsepower, but especially on this EFI bikes, these things are set up so lean from the factory, they can get hot. When you're out there running them, as hard as you can run them, and they're lean, then it just gets hot. You're racing out there in July, you could do an overheat position. I didn't have any problems with it, but you can darn sure tell that the fan was coming on all the time and the bike was just red hot from a couple times that I did race it with a stock exhaust. So replacing the exhaust, replacing the intake, and then getting your carb adjuster right allows the bike to really breathe a lot better. It runs the way it should. It's not choked off. And then with the correct jetting or the correct fuel map, now it's getting the fuel it needs. The bike will run. Obviously gets a lot more horsepower, which is another good benefit, but it also just runs really well. And that's really what you want. You want it to start, you want it to run. You don't want it to get hot. You don't want it to pop, bang, or have any dead spots, because that can cause your problems. So I put that as a must-have. I think it does, especially there if you got one of these newer bikes. It's your longevity, I think, is going to go away if you keep the stock stuff on. From there, I had a couple of things here. I put down as must-have is grab bars. Here in the front, I got one, and I got one in the rear. And I want to just show you here what the stock ones look like. So this is a stock front bumper. It's actually springy, it's impact resistant. From a bumper, this is a nice bumper. This one's a metal one up front, but especially for racing and stuff, as well as being a bumper, probably the bigger thing for me is really the grab bar. And that's the ability to come up on this thing, get off your bike, have something that you can hang on to, get some leverage on, and pull yourself out of the mud or out of a deep rut that you're stuck in. And almost as importantly is you want one that's big enough to where someone else can come over there and help you. This one here I got in the front, you can get easily 4 sets of hand on it. This one here is on the back, the stock one. The one I got back there is probably at least twice this width. 2 or 3 people can get back there and help you. If you've ever been stuck in the mud in a race, you're out of breath to start with. By the time you get yourself unstuck, you're done with. Your energy is just gone. And so that makes it really tough for the rest of the race. Typically in those bad spots, there's a lot of spectators there, and they're always happy to come over and help you. If you got nice grab bars where 2 or 3 people can come help you, 2 or 3 people will come help you, you'll get out, you're not out of breath, you'll be on quick and easy. So it's kind of a unique thing there, but I found these things here. I put these down as must-haves because one, I'm probably a little slower, maybe I get stuck more, but there's sometimes I just can't get out. I can't lift my bike, just not strong enough to lift it. I've got a bad back, and so anytime I can flag someone over to help me get something out, I do. And having something nice and easy for them and me to grab a hold of and move the bike is extremely important. So I put those down as must-haves, but again, this might be subject to you. A couple of nice things I had for nice-to-haves. I'll start with this one right here. These are shock covers. They cover your shocks. So I spent a lot of money on those shocks. Right in the mud, you get a lot of dust. These just help keep all the junk off the shafts. May or may not be absolutely necessary. Not too many people run them. I like them there. Keeps my shocks clean. So look into something like these. These are pretty inexpensive. Another thing, and I put these down as a nice to have, are these beadlock wheels. I ran a full season without them, with no problem. But your faster riders, anybody that's out there, like in an A class or pro class, they all have beadlocks. So for them, this is probably a mandatory item. But for the average person there, you don't really need them, but they do help quite a bit. So I was at the X Factor, GNCC X Factor, and I actually rolled the rear tire off the bead during the race, and that put me out. And so that kind of ended it. And I was running about 5 pounds of pressure. And so I had aired it down a little bit because just to try to get myself some more traction. and I ended up rolling the tire off there. Thankfully, I actually don't know the exact spot that I rolled the tire, but thankfully it wasn't when I was going around a high-speed turn. But wheel comes off like that, you're going to be doing one of these numbers, which isn't good. So the beadlocks, you know, I think it's going to give you a lot bigger peace of mind, a lot better comfort. But especially when you're cornering in deep ruts, you know, this tire, you can see this tire flex back when you're in kind of going around this number. It just, especially when you got low tire pressure. And so having these ones on the front, this is just a single beadlock. It's only on the outside, but this is where the tire is going to come off if it is. In the rear, I've got them on both sides, but it's going to allow me to run lower pressure, keep the wheels on. Should I get a flat, it's going to keep the wheel on and allow me to probably, especially in the back and with these 6-plies, probably allow me to continue to finish out the race. But they're a very good peace of mind. Allow you to run lower pressure when you need to and get better traction. Not have to worry about, you know, going around corners or anything like that and rolling one off. It's a pretty good safety tip there. So the other thing I got up front here, let me just take this off here so you can see. I have to, is these A-arm guards here in the front. These things right here. These things I put down as optional. I haven't seen anybody else race with those, or actually I hadn't even seen anybody with those. I tell you, I am extremely happy with those things. I have, if you got down and look closely, those things are chewed up. I have hit so many things with that. I've unfortunately had trees come in this way here and miss both of these and hit my swing arm. Saplings, oh man, you're driving through a fresh cut trail, you're running over saplings, all that stuff is just going to be hitting your A-arms. And I'm pretty darn sure if I didn't have that, I'd probably have a ruined A-arm for sure. So they're not that heavy, they're just a thick piece of aluminum. I know, I'm glad I bought them. I'd recommend the darn things, but I'm about the only one I've seen that has them. But they really do a good job of protecting your A-arm. The other thing I got here, you know, this is just something that's more of a nice to have, somewhat of a splurge. I got one of these new throttle assemblies. I was really struggling there, and this is a personal, I was really struggling with the thumb throttle. The thumb throttle was just terrible. And it was tiring, and so you know, I had to do something there. I don't want a twist throttle on this one there. I think a twist throttle for this type of racing is probably unsafe. I used to always run twist throttles, but not for this type of racing. So getting something here, making sure you got some type of thumb throttle that's compatible with your thumb, doesn't give you fatigue, and that kind of stuff is also a really good thing. All right, folks, so that's really about it. You know, there's a lot of different things out there. You know, a lot of people have different things, probably different ideas, and that's okay. But I think I've covered the big ones. Again, once you get your required stuff there, you know, I would look into very quickly getting a set of tires. I would look into very quickly get a steering stabilizer. I've got the Precision steering stabilizer. That's the best one on the market. They're pricey, but boy, do they work good. I would get that thing on the top of your list. Then look to getting your suspension done. If you got those things together, you've got yourself a great bike just with there. From that point on, you can kind of add things as you need. Again, you do have to have a skid plate. You need some type of a swing arm guard or sprocket and rotor guard. Those things there you have to have as well. Otherwise, you're just going to be breaking your bike. But once you get the guards are a couple $100 there, you'll be done with that. But getting the suspension done, the steering stabilizer, and a set of tires, you are pretty darn good shape once you got from that. You know, there's a lot of other things you can do, again, to add. I think, you know, the big 3 is a good one, where your exhaust is good. You know, the grab bars are nice. You know, you can hold off on those if you need to, but they are, I think, extremely helpful for you. But I think that's pretty much really about it there. There's one other thing here I haven't had a chance to test it, but a lot of people do run it. I don't know, I got a handlebar anti-vibration system here. I got the Precision Shock and Vibe. I just installed it. I haven't tested it out yet, but a lot of people run these, or Flash Flex handlebars, and they're basically a suspension set. They're just another thing to make it nice for you, to where you're not getting jolted or vibrating to death. I didn't put that on my list. I haven't tested it yet, but that's probably something worth mentioning there. It's probably a nice to have, is some type of an anti-vibration system for your steering stem. But that's it. So if you're looking for a cross-country bike and getting your setup, again, you kind of follow the list I got, you're going to be in great shape. But you don't have to have all this stuff. Again, you can take your stock bike out there and just have a great time. You don't really need to do anything. I raced the first couple of races with bone stock right off the showroom floor and had an awesome time. But the more you try to go faster, you're going to have to start upgrading, especially that suspension there. These things, they just don't handle well unless you just luck out and have the right weight. Mine are adjustable. My shocks were. I spent a lot of time, this is another tip for you, I spent a lot of time adjusting them in between the time when I bought the bike and started racing to I actually did the suspension. I was actually doing the adjustments myself. And by adjusting it, I got the bike probably 10 times better than it was when I got it off the showroom floor. It wasn't right. It wasn't the way I wanted it, but it was a heck of a lot better, and that got me along a lot farther. And so that's something you can always do, is start tweaking your suspension by yourself. Just making those adjustments. Read your owner's manual. It's just kind of like an eye doctor. Is it better A, better B? And you just keep doing that and making adjustments till you get, make some improvements on there. But that's about it. Again, you can run out there with the stock bikes, but as you want to go faster there, you're going to darn need some upgrades there. So that's it. Hopefully there, this is racing season starting again. We're in 2019. It's going to start up. So if you got your bike in the garage, you're thinking about it, look over some of these things. Get your mandatory things on out there for sure. And hope to see you out there on the line. Take care.